I heard my husband James say through the half-open office door, "She is too dumb to understand what is happening." Meredith has always been excellent in preparing cupcakes. Business? Please. She signed the loan papers without reading them, and she doesn't even notice when I transfer money about. Thomas, his brother, chuckled. Man, this will be simpler than we first believed. Next month we will own everything. She will be leaving, and when the company falls, nobody will point the finger at us, James said. After 20 years, she still is mindlessly in love with me. Almost too easy is how it is here. Standing still outside the rear office of my store, I held my palm across my lips to prevent gasping. My heart thumped so loudly that I worried they would hear it over the wall. I walked backwards, hoping the old floors wouldn't squeak. Meredith Wilson, this is my name. Proud owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am 47 years old. At least I considered myself to be the proud owner. Apparently now a target for my husband's avarice, the company I started from nothing over 15 years was the one that sent our daughter Veronica through college. Leaning against the brick wall, I slid out the rear entrance into the alley and felt sick. How could I have been so heedless? James had late-night business meetings with Thomas. The subtle hints I signed papers because I was too busy baking. The slow change in James's demeanor with the patronizing tone I had somehow overlooked or dismissed. Trying to relax, I inhaled deeply several times in the cool fall air. Not now, not when I was so stunned and unprepared, could I face them. I had to consider what precisely they were intending. I'd wound up wedded to a stranger somehow. Clearly Thomas's newest acquisition, a sleek new automobile, was parked across the street as I strolled toward the front of the store. How many of my cupcake sales had supported his way of life? And it was at that moment. Suppose the financial situation turned out to be worse than I had thought? What if I were facing total devastation instead than only betrayal? Originally a weekend pastime at farmers markets, Sweet Dreams began. I had always loved to bake. Growing up in a little hamlet just outside of the city, my grandma taught me something. I started selling my sweets to help Veronica pay for her braces when we needed more cash. Back then, James had been encouraging, assisting me with weekly setup of my small tent. "You've got real talent, Meredith," he'd said. "These are the best cupcakes in Minnesota." When a small storefront became available downtown, James encouraged me to take the leap. We used our savings, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and a modest bank loan. I still have the first dollar I earned framed behind the counter. For years, business was steady but not spectacular. Then, 5 years ago, one of my seasonal pumpkin maple cupcakes was featured in a local magazine. Suddenly, there were lines out the door. I expanded, hired staff, and James, who'd been working in insurance, offered to handle the financial side of things. "You focus on what you love," he'd insisted. "I'll take care of the numbers." It seemed perfect, a true partnership. But looking back, I realized the warning signs were there. 3 months ago, James suggested I sign documents for a refinancing opportunity. When I asked questions, he brushed them off, saying it was just routine and best to sign quickly to lock in the rate. Last month, Thomas started appearing more frequently at the shop, taking James out for drinks, speaking in hushed tones that stopped whenever I approached. I'd noticed odd charges on the business credit card, but assumed they were supplies for our upcoming holiday season. Even Veronica, now 20 and studying business at the University of Oregon, had mentioned something strange during her last call. "Dad asked me weird questions about business ownership and transfer of assets," she'd said. "Is he thinking of opening his own place?" I'd laughed it off then. Now, her words echoed ominously in my head as I stood in my shop, watching customers enjoy my creations. I felt a deep sense of dread. My kitchen, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like it was built on shifting sand. The cheerful yellow walls and the scent of vanilla that usually brought me comfort now felt like a facade hiding an ugly truth. A week after overhearing their conversation, I discovered just how deep the betrayal went. I'd taken the day off to visit our accountant, Beverly, who'd been doing our taxes for years, but whom James had recently suggested we replace. "I'm glad you came in, Meredith," Beverly said, her face serious. "I've been trying to reach you directly. Is something wrong?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. There are significant discrepancies in your business accounts, she explained, turning her computer screen toward me. Large withdrawals and transfers to an LLC I don't recognize, and this loan, she pointed to a document on screen, puts the bakery up as collateral for nearly triple its value. My hands trembled as I stared at the numbers, 6 figures disappearing over months, an oppressive loan I hadn't fully understood when signing. Who has access to these accounts? Beverly asked gently. Just me and James, I whispered. Her expression told me everything. She pulled out more papers showing irregularities going back further than I'd imagined. James hadn't just recently betrayed me. He'd been siphoning money for years, building to this moment when he could take everything. Beverly slid a business card across the desk. This is Gregory Palmer. He's both a financial forensics specialist and an attorney. You need to call him today. I nodded numbly, clutching the card. On the drive home, my shock morphed into something else, a cold, clear fury. The bastard was stealing not just my business, but my legacy, my passion, my connection to my grandmother. When I arrived home, James was waiting. His smile seemed sinister now, knowing what lurked behind it. I've been thinking, he said casually. Maybe it's time to step back from the bakery. You work too hard. We could sell it, enjoy life a little. His words confirmed everything. This was the beginning of their endgame, convincing me to willingly give up what they were planning to steal. I forced myself to smile. That's an interesting thought. Let me consider it. His relief was palpable. He thought I was falling for it, that I was indeed as stupid as he believed. That night, I lay awake beside the man who'd planned my ruin, listening to his peaceful snoring. The business I'd built with my sweat and tears, the recipes passed down through generations, the staff who relied on me, all of it was at risk. I couldn't confront him yet, not until I understood exactly what I was facing and had a plan. But one thing was certain. This was war, and James had no idea who he was really up against. The next morning, I met with Gregory Palmer in his downtown office. His no-nonsense demeanor was exactly what I needed. Based on what you've told me and these documents, he said, reviewing Beverly's files, your husband and his brother are attempting a rather sophisticated form of financial fraud. They're creating artificial debt against your business, then planning to trigger default terms that would force a sale to a company they likely control. Can we stop it? I asked. We can, but we need to be strategic. Your name is on these documents, so challenging them directly could be complicated. I slumped in my chair, feeling defeated. However, Gregory continued, there's another approach, if you're open to it. We could gather evidence of their conspiracy that would fundamentally change the legal landscape. Hope flickered. How would we do that? Gregory introduced me to Diana Winters, a private investigator with a specialty in business fraud. Her confidence was contagious. Men like your husband and his brother get careless because they think they're the smartest people in the room, Diana explained. We'll use that against them. Their plan was elegant. Diana would pose as a potential investor interested in the type of business James and Thomas were establishing through mutual contacts she'd invented. She'd express interest in their venture, gaining their trust, and recording their plans. Meanwhile, I would maintain the appearance of ignorance, all while securing my own position. Gregory helped me establish separate accounts and document all existing assets. We photographed equipment, created inventory lists, and gathered proof of my original investments. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. At the bakery, I was the same cheerful Meredith, greeting customers and creating new recipes. At home, I was the oblivious wife, pretending not to notice James' increasingly frequent business meetings. One evening, James announced he'd be meeting Thomas to discuss some insurance matters. I knew Diana would be there too, wearing a wire. Take your time, I said sweetly. I've got plenty to do here. Once he left, I went into his home office, something I rarely did. I needed to find any physical documents he might have kept. After an hour of searching, I found a hidden folder in his desk with copies of the loan documents, planning notes, and most damning, a business plan for Wilson Brothers Bakery opening at my current location with a projected timeline showing my exit. I photographed everything, hands shaking with anger. When I returned the folder, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a life insurance policy on me, taken out 3 months ago, with a substantial payout to James. I called Gregory immediately. "This changes things," he said gravely. "We need to accelerate our timeline. And Meredith, be careful." That night, when James returned home, I watched him with new eyes. Was the insurance policy just good planning, or something more sinister? I wasn't just fighting for my business anymore. I might be fighting for my life. The next day, Diana called with news. "I've got them on record discussing the entire scheme. They're planning to trigger the loan default next week." I felt momentary relief, then terror. I wasn't ready. We needed more time. "There's something else," Diana added. "They're meeting someone tomorrow, a health inspector they've bribed to find violations at your bakery. They want to damage your reputation before they make their move." My plan to fight back was crumbling before it even began. They were moving faster than we'd anticipated, attacking from angles I hadn't even considered. 2 days later, the health inspector showed up unannounced at Sweet Dreams. I recognized him from Diana's surveillance photos, Robert Jenkins, a cousin of Thomas's wife with a history of taking bribes. "Just a routine inspection," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I watched him search for violations, planting his finger in clean areas, testing for residue, taking photos of perfectly functioning equipment, and writing furious notes. I knew what his report would say, no matter what he actually found. That afternoon, my phone rang. Veronica calling from Oregon. "Mom, something weird is happening," she said without preamble. "Dad just called asking if I'd sign some paperwork he's sending over, something about protecting the family business and needing my signature since I'm a beneficiary." My heart raced. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd look at it first. Obviously, I'm not signing anything I don't understand." I nearly cried with relief. "Good. Don't sign anything. In fact, don't even open the package. I'll explain everything soon, I promise." "Mom, what's going on? You sound scared." I hesitated, not wanting to burden her, but needing her to understand the severity. "Your father and Uncle Thomas are trying to take the bakery from me. It's complicated, but I'm handling it." "I'm coming home," she said immediately. "No, stay there. Focus on your studies. I've got good people helping me." After we hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the walls covered with framed reviews, customer photos, and the business license in my name. They were trying to take everything, even trying to manipulate my daughter. The line had been crossed. I called a real estate agent I knew, Lynette, who specialized in commercial properties. "I need to understand something," I said. "If I wanted to sell my bakery, how quickly could it happen and what might it be worth?" Her answer stunned me. Due to the bakery's reputation and prime location, it could potentially sell for nearly twice what I'd imagined. And with the right buyer, a deal could close within weeks. A plan began forming in my mind, one so audacious it made me dizzy. What if, instead of fighting to keep the bakery, I sold it myself? Not because they forced me, but on my terms, to someone who would value what I'd built. I called Gregory to explain my idea. "It's risky," he warned. "If James finds out before we're ready, he could try to block the sale. But if we succeed, then you control the proceeds, not him. And with the evidence we've gathered, we can ensure he doesn't benefit from his fraud." Diana's next call cemented my decision. She discovered that Thomas wasn't just helping James, he was blackmailing him. Apparently, James had been embezzling from his insurance clients for years, and Thomas had proof. "Your husband is being played too," Diana explained. "Thomas has been recording their conversations as insurance, threatening to expose James if he doesn't go through with stealing your business." The betrayal was even deeper than I'd imagined. My husband wasn't just a thief, he was a coward, being controlled by his own brother. That night, I drove to the outskirts of the city and parked at a scenic overlook. I needed space to think clearly. The bakery had been my life for 15 years. Could I really let it go? As I watched the city lights flicker below, I realized the bakery wasn't just about the building or even the business. It was about what I had created, what I had proven to myself. I could create something new, But first, I needed to free myself from James and his brother, once and for all. The next morning, I called Lynette. I'm ready to sell, but this needs to stay absolutely confidential. I understand, she assured me. I know someone who might be very interested, Helen Bryant from Heavenly Bites. She's been looking to expand. Helen was my biggest competitor, but I'd always respected her business acumen. Her 3 locations were run efficiently, and she treated her staff well. If anyone would preserve what I'd built, it would be her. By the weekend, Helen and I were sitting in Gregory's office negotiating terms. She'd offer market value, plus a premium for the immediate sale and intact staffing. Additionally, I'd receive royalties on my signature recipes if she continued to use them. I've admired what you've built, Meredith, Helen said. I'd be honored to continue your legacy. We shook hands, and Gregory began preparing the paperwork we would need to move quickly. The health inspector's fraudulent report was expected any day, and James' loan default scheme was imminent. Meanwhile, Diana continued gathering evidence. She'd placed legal surveillance in my office at the bakery, capturing a meeting between James and Thomas where they explicitly discussed their fraud. Once the health department puts a shutdown notice on the door, the loan terms will trigger, James had said. She'll be so upset about the violations, she won't even notice what's happening with the business until it's too late. Their callousness was breathtaking. 15 years of marriage, and James saw me as nothing but a means to an end. Just as we were finalizing the sale, an unexpected complication arose. The bank holding the fraudulent loan contacted me, concerned about unusual activities with the business accounts. James had attempted to move more money, triggering their fraud detection systems. They're accelerating their timeline, Gregory warned. If the bank freezes everything for investigation, our sale could be delayed. I needed to buy time. Reluctantly, I called James. The bank called me about the business accounts, I said, feigning confusion. Something about unusual transfers. There was a pause. It's nothing to worry about, he said smoothly. Just some restructuring I'm doing to improve our tax situation. I'll handle it. Should I call them back? They seemed concerned. No, he said too quickly. I'll take care of it. That's my department. Remember, you focus on your baking. His condescension strengthened my resolve. I contacted the bank directly, working with Gregory to explain everything. I was aware of the unusual activities and was addressing them as part of a business transition. We provided just enough information to prevent a freeze without revealing our full plan. With that crisis averted, we pushed forward. Helen expedited her financing, and we signed preliminary agreements. The final paperwork would be ready in 3 days, ironically, the same day the health inspector's report was due, and James planned to trigger the loan default. The night before everything would come to a head, I packed a small bag and prepared to stay with a friend. I couldn't bear to be in the same house as James anymore, knowing what I knew. As I was leaving, he came home early, catching me with the suitcase. Going somewhere? He asked, suspicion evident. I need some space, I said, not entirely lying. I'm staying with Patricia for a few days. He looked relieved, no doubt assuming I was oblivious to his plans and just needed girl time. Sure, that's probably good. I've got some business matters to wrap up anyway. I nearly laughed at the irony. Yes, I said, I believe we both do. On the morning the health inspector's report was due, I arrived at Sweet Dreams earlier than usual. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day James and Thomas thought they would take everything from me. Instead, it would be the day they lost everything themselves. Helen had arranged for her operations manager to meet me for a final walkthrough before signing. Gregory was prepared with all documentation, and Diana had positioned herself nearby to record what promised to be an entertaining confrontation. Right on schedule, Thomas arrived first, carrying a briefcase and wearing a smug expression. He was surprised to see me. Meredith, didn't expect you in so early. I'm always here early on important days, I replied calmly. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his facade. Is James here yet? He's on his way. 10 minutes later, James walked in, accompanied by a man I didn't recognize, presumably their lawyer. When James saw me, he faltered momentarily before recovering. Meredith, you remember Arthur Wilson? He's handling some paperwork for us today. I smiled. Of course. And you all remember Helen Bryant. James's face paled as Helen stepped forward. What is she doing here? He demanded. Helen is buying sweet dreams, I announced. In fact, we're finalizing the sale this morning. She's already transferred the funds to escrow. The shock on their faces was priceless. Thomas recovered first. That's impossible. The business isn't yours to sell. Actually, Gregory said, stepping into view, it absolutely is. We have documentation proving Ms. Wilson's full ownership. What we also have is substantial evidence of attempted fraud by both of you gentlemen. Diana emerged, holding up a flash drive, including recorded conversations detailing your entire scheme. James lunged toward her, but security guards Helen had wisely hired stepped forward. Don't make this worse for yourself, Gregory warned. The evidence has already been duplicated and secured. As if on cue, Robert Jenkins arrived with his fraudulent health inspection report. Seeing the crowded bakery and the tension, he stopped in the doorway. Perhaps you'd like to explain why you were prepared to falsify an official health report? Diana asked him. Jenkins looked at Thomas, then at the security guards, then back at Diana, making a quick calculation. He turned and hurried out without a word. You've lost, I told James and Thomas. Sweet Dreams is sold. The money is protected from your schemes. And by the way, I added, looking directly at James, I filed for divorce. The aftermath was swift and devastating for James and Thomas. With Diana's evidence, both faced criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. James had additional charges related to embezzlement from his insurance clients. Thomas's attempt to distance himself failed spectacularly when his recorded blackmail was revealed. I sold Sweet Dreams to Helen for $1.2 million, nearly double my expected price. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, with the judge ruling that James had no claim to the proceeds, given the evidence of his attempted fraud. His assets were frozen during the investigation, leaving him to face his mounting legal troubles with court-appointed representation. 6 months later, I stood in a small storefront in Eugene, Oregon, just a mile from Veronica's university campus. The sign painter was just finishing the window display, Meredith's Kitchen Bakery and Cooking School. What do you think? I asked Veronica, who stood beside me. It's perfect, Mom, she said, squeezing my hand. I still can't believe you moved here. New beginnings, I said. Besides, I get to see you more often, and you get free baking lessons to impress your roommates with. Part of the proceeds from the sale, I'd created this smaller, more personal venture, a combination bakery and cooking school where I could share my grandmother's recipes and techniques with others. It was less about building an empire and more about pursuing joy. James and Thomas both accepted plea deals to avoid longer sentences. The last I heard, James was serving 3 years, and Thomas was in a minimum security facility for 18 months. Their reputations and careers were destroyed, a fitting punishment for men who had valued money above all else. As I unlocked the door to my new bakery for the first time as owner, I felt no regret for what I'd left behind. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. I discovered my own strength and resilience, proving that I was anything but the stupid woman they had assumed me to be.